It's crazy how Call of the Night is this, like, on one hand, very artistic, very tasteful, very beautiful series that's trying to break away from a lot of the trends and norms you're expecting when it comes to anime. But then on the other hand, it's downright horny and lewd with jokes, but at the same time, despite seeing all that, it's one of the more, I would say, wholesome shows wrapped up into one. And I think when it comes to any sort of vampire story, if you're going to be an actual vampire story, I mean, you gotta be horny. Let's be completely honest. Vampires are a very seductive creature. They're a creature of the night. It's this whole intimate thing. But I think what really gets Call of the Night so well is that they're bringing up some interesting, potential relationship dilemmas. Because when you think about it, right, a vampire who's been on this earth for God knows how many years, she's probably sucked her fair few of necks, right? And the sucking is very much both a feeding and a sexual thing. And for someone who's constantly talking very erotic, she also seemingly is someone who doesn't quite feel comfortable with that more personal relationships type stuff. So in a lot of ways, both her and Coach kind of feel like they're naturally immature and are very naive to what a relationship is, and they're actually taking their time building them up to the I love you moment, which, honestly, I was kind of expecting them to get into it this episode just because usually when you have that kind of flustered, naive, younger boy character, because he's laying next to this hot girl, ultimately he's going to say, well, of course I love her. No, it's just his hormones, he's flustered, he recognizes as such, but he knows he wants to get to know her more and wants to at the very least be friends. And every time he progresses that relationship, whether it's the simple way he refers to her, not showing her like a sense of seniority, but more so like they're friends, they're getting more acquainted, she gets very flustered. For someone who can talk so naughty, like she's pulled from Shimonetta, she's someone who feels like a very young high school girl just kind of figuring out what it is she wants to do. And she's just teasing this boy she's clearly starting to like, but doesn't know what to do. And it's interesting to see how they use the vampirism in a way to progress that kind of intimate relationship without it being full-on a magical I love you. And I think by shielding them with the if he falls in love and has his blood sucked, he will become a vampire, which, don't get me wrong, that would provide for a new chapter in this story. But the idea of a human who wanders the night with this vampire acquaintance who feeds on him, and it's a mixture of feeding / sexual lust sort of a thing. It's interesting that they're shielding him from emitting those feelings too early, allowing him to build a kind of slow burn romance with these two. And I think the idea of the exclusivity of the kind of suck, right? The sucking of the blood. The idea that he was a little jealous. He was a little pissed off that it seemed like she was going around the night and feeding, and she was explaining it like, do you want to eat the same food every night, right? You know, sometimes you're going to want rice, sometimes you're going to want steak. There's a different thing. And I love the fact that it turns out that no, she was just looking for him the whole time because his blood does taste so good, but also there's clearly some chemistry brewing. So I like the fact that they were using that as it was logical, right? She's a vampire, she's going to feed, and ultimately that makes sense. Usually what a show like this does is they make it so, oh, don't go harm anyone, I'll be your, you can feed on me every night, you'll be fine. Sometimes they go the route of they get bored of the blood, but even in a show like this, they're saying his blood clearly is just better than the rest, so you don't really have to worry about that either. For a show that's very simple, that's a very simple romance, all things considered, a slice of life, what happens at the nighttime as they really in this episode let the characters shine even more so than the world did in episode 1. I thought they did such a great job at making me say, it is so fun following these characters. I love their dialogue. Look at the moment when he gives her the kind of wristwatch, the communicator. He gives this story about how he bought one and then he placed it somewhere hoping someone would pick it up and then he could talk with them. He got a little too nervous, never did. Of course, the end of the episode comes along and it seems like that's the person who picked it up, and it's going to be interesting to see if they decide to do more of like a love triangle sort of a thing, which would be very interesting given the already natural chemistry, but also the fact that they're admitting that they're not in love, so it'd be fun to see what they want to do with that. Or if it will just be he builds up friends alongside of the growing relationship with Nazuna and him. But ultimately, it's nice to see, when he gave her her own, because she's someone who is a child in a lot of ways. She likes playtime. She likes to, goof off and pretend they're assassins or ninjas, saying, what's my order? Should I kill the target? But it was really cute just to see them kind of feel like kids after also seeing them in these more intense situations. I think it's interesting because when you look at both of their lives, it feels lonely, right? He grew up with really no friends or loved ones around him, seemingly, right? And even though he's arguing, like, sometimes it's better to be alone, I mean, ultimately, he's clearly someone who desires that companionship. Otherwise, he wouldn't be going out every night looking for her and trying to give her a cell phone that isn't just looking like it's trying to compensate for something of your own shortcomings. But I love the fact that for her, she's been hundreds of years probably alive, and the fact that she's been more of a recluse, she's been alone, and she's kind of done her own thing. So it feels like both of them are finally getting that companionship that they probably have wanted, but have argued for one reason or another they don't actually need, but now we're starting to realize that they do. The art and animation is still, I think, really well done. I love looking at the landscape, and I'm glad to know that most of this show should be set at night, because, I mean, it's hard not to just get sucked into this world and not really seeing anything too different than what we saw in the first episode. In fact, I think we saw all pretty much the same locations as episode 1. It still isn't boring to look at, and there's hardly any characters on screen at any given moment. You have our Central 2, and you got the same drunken guys at the bus stop, but there's not a lot of, like, characters. There's not a lot of, like, normally moving things to make a scene exciting. Instead, it's the lighting, it's the yellows, it's the purples. It's just seeing this world at night without the clutter, without the pollution, without the noise or the just drama. And that's what makes, I think, these two, even sometimes just one of them, walking through these scenes just so mesmerizing, because it is called the night, something that's trying to make you say the nighttime is beautiful. And of course, I already agreed with that statement. But a show like this, you know, you don't see it too often. You see vampire shows, you see romance shows, you see those slow burn shows, but the way they're going about directing this one, it both feels different on the vampire side of things, but also the presentation with how it's directing its world. And it's no surprise why this man is so infatuated with wanting to become a vampire for more than one reason. And I'm excited to see what they do with the cast of characters. I've heard the story and characters do get rather good as it goes on. Episode 1 was more of a setup, and what a beautiful setup it was. Episode 2 really lets the characters take hold, and yeah, it's erotic, it's also adorable, but it's also beautifully directed and artistic, and it's this weirdly, oddly erotic, adorable, artistic anime that you don't see too much of, but usually when they nail it, it becomes something that's not going to be forgotten in a season's time. With the introduction of another character who might be tagging along with the nighttime adventures, I mean, we haven't seen too many characters out in the nightlife, so the fact that it is someone who seemingly knows him and was discovered in the nighttime scenery, I mean, even if they don't go like a love triangle route, it'll be very fascinating to see, because they always seemingly are looking for each other when they're not connected in the nighttime. So it'd be interesting if she like popped in and saw him chatting with someone else and then started to get a little, you know, flustered about the exclusivity, like, okay, well, you don't want me sucking anyone else's blood, well, I don't want you chatting with anyone else, right? It could provide for some fun drama that may not be intense drama, but some of that drama that just, it adds more than it subtracts, like you sometimes see in a show like this. But thoughts down below, whether if you're a fan of that manga or if you're anime original, what did you think of episode 2, and are you going to be watching episode 3 next week? And do let me know. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.